The stars themselves seemed to bend away from the massive ships that moved through space like dark shadows. These were not ordinary vessels. They belonged to the Vorthak Empire, and wherever they went, death followed close behind. Admiral Zexithira stood 12 feet tall on the bridge of his flagship. His black scales gleamed under the red lights of the war room. Sharp claws clicked against the metal controls as he studied the star map before him. His yellow eyes, cold as winter moons, focused on a small blue dot at the edge of the display. "What do we know about this system?" he asked his second-in-command. "The third planet shows signs of life, Admiral," replied Commander Velthar, his voice a low growl. "Our scouts report primitive creatures. They call their world Earth. They have basic technology but no real weapons that could threaten us." Zexthira's mouth opened in what passed for a smile among his kind, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Perfect. How many of our ships will we need? For such weak prey?" "Perhaps 10 vessels, Admiral. Maybe 5 would be enough." The Admiral laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Take 20. I want this conquest to be memorable. The galaxy must remember what happens when the Vorthak Empire decides to expand. For 300 years, the Vorthak had been the terror of known space. They were born hunters, created by evolution to kill and destroy. Their home world was a nightmare of constant warfare, where only the strongest survived to breed. When they finally reached the stars, they brought that same brutal philosophy with them. Every species they encountered had 2 choices: submit completely or face total destruction. Most chose submission. Those who fought back were wiped from existence so completely that even their names were forgotten. The Vorthak war machine was simple but effective. They would arrive at a planet with overwhelming force, demonstrate their power by destroying military targets, and then demand surrender. If surrender came quickly, the population would be enslaved. If it did not, the population would be eliminated. In 3 centuries, they had never lost a single battle. Far across the galaxy, on a blue world orbiting a yellow star, Captain Jake Murphy was having what he thought would be a quiet morning. He sat in the command center of the Earth Defense Force headquarters, drinking coffee and reading reports from the outer colonies. The coffee was terrible, as always. The reports were boring, as always. Pirates near Jupiter had been caught smuggling weapons. A mining dispute on Mars needed arbitration. Standard problems that required standard solutions. Jake was 42 years old and had been in space defense for 20 years. He had seen pirates, rebels, and the occasional asteroid that needed to be blown up before it hit something important. He had never seen aliens. Nobody on Earth had ever seen aliens. The human race had spread to dozens of worlds and built hundreds of space stations, but they had always been alone. Some scientists said intelligent alien life was impossible. Others said the galaxy was too big and too empty for different species to ever meet. Jake believed the galaxy was full of life, but that everyone was too far apart to make contact. He never imagined that something might be coming to find them. The first warning came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station near Pluto. The message arrived through the standard communication channels, but there was something in the operator's voice that made Jake pay attention. "Command, this is Station 7. We're picking up some unusual readings on the long-range sensors." Jake set down his coffee cup. "What kind of readings, 7? "Sir, we're showing multiple large objects moving in formation toward our solar system. They're big, Command. Really big, and they're moving fast." "How big?" Jake asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "Each object appears to be roughly 2 kilometers in length. We count 20 of them, moving in perfect formation. Their speed is approximately 0.7 light speed." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. Humans had nothing that big. Human ships were measured in hundreds of meters, not kilometers, and nothing human could travel at 70% of light speed. "Are you certain of these readings, 7? "We've checked them 3 times, sir. The objects will reach the outer edge of our solar system in approximately 6 hours. Jake stood up quickly, his chair rolling backward. 20 massive objects moving faster than anything humans had ever built, heading directly for Earth. This was either first contact with an alien species, or it was the beginning of something much worse. "Alert all stations," he ordered. "Full defensive positions, contact the lunar bases and Mars colony." Tell them we have unknown contacts approaching and to prepare for possible hostile action. Sir? The operator's voice came back, sounding worried. Should we attempt to communicate with these objects? Jake thought about it for a moment. Every protocol they had said that first contact should be handled with diplomacy. Try to communicate. Show peaceful intentions. Make friends, not enemies. But 20 massive ships moving in military formation did not look like a diplomatic mission. Prepare communication channels, Jake decided, but keep all weapon systems ready. If these visitors are friendly, we'll welcome them. If they're not... He paused, looking out the window at the Earth below. If they're not, we'll show them that humans don't give up easily. In space, the Vorthak fleet continued its approach. Admiral Zex Thera studied the data his scouts had gathered about the creatures on the blue planet. They were small, weak, and apparently spent most of their time fighting each other instead of preparing for real threats. It would be almost too easy. The Vorthak fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system, like 20 dark daggers cutting through space. Admiral Zex Thera watched his tactical display with satisfaction as the primitive human vessels scrambled to form defensive positions. Look how they cluster around their home world, he said to his officers, like frightened children hiding behind their mother's legs. The human ships were tiny compared to the Vorthak vessels, where each alien warship stretched 2 kilometers long. The largest human cruiser barely reached 400 meters. The difference was like comparing sharks to minnows. Admiral, reported his communications officer, the humans are transmitting on multiple frequencies. They appear to be attempting first contact protocols. Zex Thera's laugh echoed through the bridge. How quaint. They think this is a diplomatic meeting. He gestured with one massive claw. Ignore their transmissions. Begin the demonstration. On Luna Base, Lieutenant Amy Parker watched the alien fleet through her telescope with growing dread. The moon's primary defense installation was home to 300 humans who maintained the mining operations and served as an early warning system for Earth. Amy was 28 years old and had never expected to see combat. She was an engineer, not a soldier. Her job was to keep the mining equipment running and the life support systems functioning. But as the alien ships moved closer, she realized that job descriptions might not matter much longer. Parker called Major Bill Collins, the base commander. Get your people to the defensive positions. Those ships are heading straight for us. Amy looked at the display showing the approaching fleet. Sir, we have 17 mining lasers and some construction. Explosives? What are we supposed to do against ships that size? Whatever we can, Collins replied grimly. Earth Command says reinforcements are on the way, but we need to hold out until they arrive. The first Vorthak ship reached Luna's orbit and released a swarm of smaller craft. These landing vessels were still larger than most human ships, each carrying 50 Vorthak warriors armed with energy weapons and protected by thick armor. Commander Rick Hayes watched from the orbital defense platform as the alien forces descended on the moon base. Rick was a 20-year veteran who had fought in the Mars Rebellion and the asteroid belt conflicts. He thought he had seen everything warfare could offer. He was wrong. The Vorthak warriors that emerged from their landing craft stood 12 feet, tall and moved with terrifying grace. Their black scales deflected the humans' laser weapons like rain hitting a roof. Their own weapons fired bolts of green energy that cut through metal and flesh with equal ease. My God, whispered Rick's communications officer. They're not even taking cover, it was true. The Vorthak advanced across the moon's surface in the open, seemingly unconcerned about human defensive fire. Their confidence was absolute, but Amy Parker was not ready to give up. As the aliens breached the outer walls of Luna Base, she led her engineering team through the maintenance tunnels that connected the mining operations. We can't fight them head-on, she told her people, but we know this base better than they do. We know every pipe, every conduit, every weak point in the structure. The Vorthak expected the humans to flee or surrender. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Explosions erupted from unexpected directions. Power systems failed at critical moments. Gravity generators malfunctioned, sending warriors floating helplessly into walls. Amy's team had turned the base itself into a weapon. "How are they doing this?" growled Captain Mordak as another section of the base suffered a mysterious malfunction. "These creatures should be cowering in fear." His answer came in the form of a massive explosion that tore through the central processing plant. Amy had rigged the mining charges to detonate in a chain reaction that brought down an entire section of the facility. 15 Vorthak warriors were crushed under tons of debris. For the first time in their history, the Vorthak had lost soldiers to what they considered prey. Back on Earth, Captain Jake Murphy coordinated the defense from his command center. Reports were flooding in from across the solar system as more alien ships spread out to attack human installations. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "we're getting some strange readings from Luna Base. The Vorthak landed there an hour ago, but they're not advancing as quickly as expected." "What's the status of Lieutenant Parker's team?" Jake asked. "Still fighting, sir. They've managed to eliminate at least 20 enemy soldiers using improvised tactics." Jake felt a spark of hope. If a small group of engineers could hold off the aliens, maybe humanity had a chance after all. On Luna, Amy Parker crouched in a damaged corridor, breathing hard. Half her team was dead, and the aliens were closing in on their position. But she had learned something important in the past hour. The Vorthak were strong and well-armed, but they were also predictable. They relied on their superior size and firepower to overwhelm enemies. They did not adapt quickly to unexpected situations. "Collins," she whispered into her communicator, "I need you to shut down life support in sections 4 through 7. "That'll kill anyone in those areas," the Major replied. "The aliens don't know that," Amy said. "They're wearing environmental suits. They'll assume it's safe to enter those sections." 10 minutes later, 20 Vorthak warriors entered the darkened corridors of Section 5. They found nothing but empty rooms and silent machinery. They did not notice the gas canisters Amy had hidden throughout the area, or the remote detonators attached to each one. The explosion lit up the moon's surface like a small sun. Admiral Zex Thyra stared at his tactical display in disbelief. What should have been a simple demonstration of power had turned into an actual battle. His forces were taking casualties against an enemy that should have been helpless. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "Captain Mordak is requesting reinforcements at the lunar facility." "Reinforcements?" Zex Thyra's voice rose to a roar. "Against a mining station?" For the first time in 3 centuries, the Vorthak Empire had encountered prey that fought back effectively. The humans were not behaving according to the rules that had governed every previous conquest. They were not surrendering. They were not fleeing in terror. Instead, they were learning, adapting, and turning their weaknesses into strengths. The galaxy's deadliest predators had just discovered that their prey had teeth. 3 weeks had passed since the first battle at Luna Base, and the war had spread across the entire solar system. What Admiral Zex Thyra had expected to be a quick conquest had become something he had never experienced before. A real fight. The Vorthak had superior ships, better weapons, and stronger bodies. But the humans kept finding ways to make none of that matter. Sergeant Lisa Brooks crouched in the shadows of an asteroid mining station that the Vorthak had captured 2 days earlier. She led a team of 12 special operations soldiers who had volunteered for what everyone agreed was probably a suicide mission. "Remember," she whispered to her team through the comm system, "these aliens have better hearing and smell than we do, but they think like hunters. They expect their prey to run away or hide. They don't expect their prey to hunt them back." Lisa was 35 years old and had spent 15 years in Earth's Special Forces. She had learned to fight in jungles, deserts, and space stations. But she had never fought aliens who stood 12 feet tall and had claws that could cut through steel. That did not stop her from trying. The asteroid station was supposed to be heavily guarded, but Lisa's team had been watching the Vorthak patrol patterns for hours. The aliens were disciplined and professional, but they followed the same routes at the same times. They were predictable. Humans, Lisa had learned, were very good at using predictability against their enemies. "Johnson, take position near the power generator," she ordered. "Martinez, you're at the communications array. Remember, we're not here to win a fight. We're here to make them afraid." The concept of making the Vorthak afraid would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. The aliens had conquered dozens of species across the galaxy. Fear was something they caused, not something they felt. But humans were teaching them new experiences. Lisa's team moved through the station like ghosts. They had studied captured Vorthak equipment and learned that the aliens' armor had weak points at the joints. Their weapons were powerful but took several seconds to recharge between shots. Their night vision was excellent, but they were partially colorblind. Every weakness could be exploited by someone smart enough to think of how. The first Vorthak patrol never knew what hit them. Lisa's team used modified mining tools that fired metal spikes instead of laser bolts. The spikes were designed to punch through the weak points in alien armor, and they were completely silent. 5 Vorthak warriors simply collapsed and stopped moving. Their patrol route became empty space where guards were supposed to be. Phase 1 complete, Lisa reported, moving to Phase 2. While Lisa's team was learning to hunt aliens, Dr. Kevin Walsh was learning to understand them. The 38-year-old biologist had been given access to captured Vorthak equipment and bodies, and what he discovered changed everything humans thought they knew about their enemies. They're not as different from us as they look, Kevin told the research team gathered in his laboratory. Yes, they're bigger and stronger, but their basic biology follows the same patterns as Earth life. Kevin had always been fascinated by how life adapted to different environments. On Earth, creatures developed different solutions to the same basic problems: how to find food, how to avoid being eaten, how to reproduce successfully. The Vorthak had solved those problems by becoming perfect predators. But perfection, Kevin realized, could also be a weakness. Look at this genetic analysis, he said, pointing to a display screen. Every Vorthak we've examined has essentially identical DNA. They've eliminated genetic diversity in favor of optimization. His assistant, Dr. Nancy Ford, leaned forward to study the data. That means they're all vulnerable to the same biological attacks. Exactly, Kevin said. On Earth, genetic diversity helps species survive diseases and environmental changes. The Vorthak traded that survival advantage for physical superiority. Kevin began working on a project that would have been unthinkable 3 weeks earlier. If the Vorthak were genetically uniform, then a biological weapon designed for one of them would work on all of them. It was not the kind of research Kevin had ever wanted to do. Before the war, he had studied alien life forms in the hope of learning about peaceful coexistence. Now he was trying to find ways to kill an entire species, but the Vorthak had made that choice for him when they decided to exterminate humanity. Back on the asteroid station, Lisa's team was discovering just how dangerous their enemies could be when they realized they were being hunted. The remaining Vorthak had found the bodies of their patrol and immediately changed their entire defensive strategy. They're not following the patterns anymore, reported Johnson from his position near the power generator. They're moving in random in groups and checking every shadow. Lisa smiled grimly. Good. That means they're scared. Fear was something the Vorthak were not equipped to handle. For 300 years, they had been the predators. Every species they encountered either submitted immediately or died quickly. They had never faced an enemy that forced them to constantly look over their shoulders. Brooks, came a transmission from Commander Rick Hayes in orbit. We're detecting increased alien activity around your position. You need to get out of there. Negative, Command, Lisa replied. We're not done yet. The Vorthak were bringing more troops to the asteroid station, but that was exactly what Lisa wanted. Every soldier they sent to hunt her team was a soldier who was not attacking human civilian targets. Martinez, activate the communications jamming, she ordered. Johnson, prepare to overload the power systems. Everyone else, remember what we practiced. The Vorthak expected to corner the human infiltrators and eliminate them with overwhelming force. Instead, they found that the humans had turned the entire station into a trap. Power conduits exploded, plunging sections of the facility into darkness. Communication systems broadcast painful high-frequency sounds that disrupted Vorthak hearing. Emergency systems activated randomly, creating chaos and confusion. In the middle of this manufactured mayhem, Lisa's team moved like deadly shadows. They struck from unexpected angles, eliminated targets quickly, and disappeared before the aliens could respond. This is impossible, growled Captain Mordak as another of his squads failed to report in. How can 12 small creatures cause this much damage? The answer was something the Vorthak military had never had to consider before. Humans did not fight like any species they had ever encountered. Most prey species were driven by panic when faced with superior predators. They made desperate, irrational decisions that made them easy to defeat. Humans became more dangerous when they were threatened. They planned, they adapted, and they learned from every encounter. Each battle taught them something new about their enemies, and they used that knowledge to become more effective killers. By the time Lisa's team extracted from the asteroid station, they had eliminated 47 Vorthak warriors and destroyed critical infrastructure that would take weeks to repair. More importantly, they had sent a message to the entire alien fleet. Nowhere was safe. The prey had become predators, and the hunt had begun. Admiral Zexthira stood in his command center, staring at reports that made no sense. In 6 weeks of fighting, his mighty fleet had not conquered a single human world. Instead, his losses were mounting every day. "Admiral," reported his intelligence officer, "we have lost 3 more supply ships in the outer system. The humans are using small attack craft that appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly." "How is this possible?" Zexthira roared. "We have the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. These creatures should be extinct by now." The truth was something the Vorthak Empire had never faced before. Every previous conquest had followed the same pattern. Show overwhelming force, demand surrender, crush any resistance quickly. The formula had worked for 3 centuries. But humans did not follow the rules that other species obeyed. Instead of surrendering when faced with superior firepower, they scattered and regrouped. Instead of fighting conventional battles, they could not win. They struck at supply lines and communication networks. Instead of protecting their strong points, they abandoned them and turned them into traps. Most disturbing of all, they were learning from every encounter and becoming more dangerous with each passing day. On Mars colony, Colonel Steve Mitchell received the transmission he had been dreading. The Vorthak fleet was moving toward Earth, and intelligence suggested they were preparing for something unprecedented. Steve was 45 years old and had commanded colonial defense forces for 12 years. He understood military strategy, and he understood the enemy they were fighting. The Vorthak were becoming frustrated with human tactics, and frustrated predators often did terrible things. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "Earth Command is requesting an update on our defensive preparations." Steve looked at the tactical display showing Mars and its surrounding space. "Tell them we're as ready as we can be. But if the Vorthak decide to glass the entire planet from orbit, there's not much we can do to stop them." The phrase, "glass the planet," referred to orbital bombardment so intense that it would turn the surface into molten rock. It was something the Vorthak had done to species that refused to surrender quickly enough. Steve feared that humans had pushed their enemies past the point of wanting to conquer them. Now the aliens might simply want to eliminate them entirely. His fears proved correct when the first bombardment began. The Vorthak fleet positioned itself in high orbit around Earth and began firing their heavy weapons at civilian targets. Cities that had stood for hundreds of years vanished in flashes of superheated plasma. Millions of people died in the first hour of the attack. Captain Jake Murphy watched from his command bunker as the planet he had sworn to defend burned above his head. The sight filled him with a rage that surprised him with its intensity. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the aliens are broadcasting a message on all frequencies." "Put it through," Jake ordered. Admiral Zexthira's voice filled the command center, translated by computers into human language. "People of Earth, you have proven more troublesome than expected. But this ends now. Surrender completely, or we will reduce your entire world to ash. You have 1 hour to decide." Jake stared at the display showing the devastation above. The Vorthak had made a critical error. They thought that by attacking civilians they would break human morale and force a surrender. Instead, they had done something much more dangerous. They had made the war personal for every human in the solar system. "Open a channel to all defense forces," Jake ordered. "All frequencies, maximum power." When the channel opened, Jake's voice was calm and controlled, but there was something in his tone that made everyone listening pay attention. "This is Captain Murphy, Earth Defense Command. The enemy has just demonstrated that they are not interested in conquest. They want extinction. Every human base, every human ship, every human soldier now has one mission: make them pay for what they've done. Steve Mitchell received Jake's transmission on Mars and felt something cold settle in his chest. The war had just changed from a fight for survival into something much darker. All units, he broadcast to his forces. New rules of engagement. The enemy has targeted civilians. As of now, there are no Vorthak civilians. The Vorthak had conquered dozens of species across the galaxy, but they had never faced an enemy that could match their capacity for ruthless warfare. They were about to learn that humans, when pushed to the edge, could be just as brutal as any predator. Dr. Kevin Walsh worked frantically in his laboratory, knowing that time was running out. His biological weapon was nearly ready, but the Vorthak were killing millions of people every hour they delayed. "Nancy," he called to his assistant, "how long until we can deploy the pathogen?" 6 hours for final testing, Dr. Ford replied. "But Kevin, once we release this, every Vorthak in the solar system will die. All of them." Kevin paused in his work. 3 months ago, the idea of wiping out an entire species would have horrified him. But 3 months ago, that species had not been trying to exterminate humanity. "They made this choice when they started bombing our cities," he said quietly. "Prepare for immediate deployment." In space, Sergeant Lisa Brooks led a desperate mission against the Vorthak flagship. Her team had commandeered a cargo hauler and filled it with nuclear explosives. The plan was simple: ram the enemy command ship and detonate the warheads. It was a suicide mission, but Lisa had volunteered without hesitation. The aliens had killed her sister in the bombardment of Chicago. Personal revenge was something humans understood very well. "Remember," she told her team as they approached the massive alien vessel, "we're not just trying to win this battle. We're sending a message to every Vorthak in the galaxy. If you want to fight humans, you better be ready to die for it." The cargo hauler slammed into the flagship's hull and exploded with the force of a small star. The blast tore through 3 decks and killed hundreds of alien crew members, but more importantly, it damaged the ship's main weapon systems. Admiral Zexathyra felt his flagship shudder under the impact and realized something that chilled him to his core bones. The humans were not just fighting back anymore. They were willing to sacrifice themselves to hurt their enemies. In 300 years of conquest, the Vorthak had never encountered a species that would choose mutual destruction over surrender. They were facing an enemy that preferred death to defeat, and that made humans the most dangerous opponents they had ever fought. The galaxy's deadliest predators were discovering that their prey had become something much worse, an enemy with nothing left to lose. The biological weapon spread through the Vorthak fleet like wildfire through dry grass. Dr. Kevin Walsh had designed it to be perfect in its lethality, and it worked exactly as intended. Within hours of deployment, alien crew members began collapsing at their stations. The pathogen attacked their nervous systems, causing paralysis and organ failure. There was no cure because the Vorthak had never needed to develop immunity to diseases that targeted their specific genetic structure. Admiral Zexathyra felt the first symptoms as he tried to coordinate his fleet's retreat from Earth orbit. His vision blurred, his massive hands began to shake, and he realized with growing horror that his perfect predator species had a fatal weakness. "Admiral," gasped his communications officer, who was also showing signs of infection, "we're receiving surrender offers from the humans." Zexathyra almost laughed, but the sound came out as a weak cough. After months of being unable to force human surrender, the aliens were now being offered the chance to surrender themselves, but the terms were not negotiable. Captain Julia Foster stood on the bridge of the human cruiser Defiance and watched the mighty Vorthak flagship drift helplessly in space. Julia was 33 years old and had been promoted to captain after her predecessor died in the defense of Mars. She had never expected to be accepting the surrender of the galaxy's most feared predator species. "Admiral Zexathyra," she said into the communication system, "this is Captain Foster of the Earth Defense Force. Your fleet is disabled and your crew is dying. Do you wish to discuss terms?" The reply came after a long delay. and the alien leader's voice was noticeably weaker than it had been weeks earlier. What are your terms, human? Julia looked at the list that had been prepared by Earth Command. The terms were harsh, but considering what the Vorthak had done to human cities, they were merciful. Complete surrender of all Vorthak military forces in this system, transfer of all weapons and ship technology to human control, relocation of surviving Vorthak personnel to designated worlds under human supervision. There was another long silence before Zexthera responded. And if we refuse? Then you die here, Julia said simply. All of you. The biological agent will kill every member of your species in this fleet within the next 6 hours. We have the antidote, but it will only be provided to those who surrender unconditionally. The choice was clear: submit to human authority or face extinction. For a species that had spent 3 centuries forcing the same choice on others, the irony was bitter but undeniable. 3 days later, Captain Jake Murphy walked through the corridors of the captured Vorthak flagship. The massive vessel that had once terrorized entire star systems was now under human control, its surviving crew confined to quarters under heavy guard. Jake found Admiral Zexthera in what had been the Alien Command Center. The once mighty Predator was sitting on the floor, his 12-foot frame reduced to a shadow of its former intimidating presence. The biological weapon had not killed him, but it had left him permanently weakened. "You do not fight like the others," Zexthera said as Jake approached. His voice was quiet and filled with something that might have been respect. "Others?" Jake asked. "The species we conquered before you. They fought with honor, or they surrendered with dignity, or they died with defiance. You humans, you fight to win. Nothing else matters to you." Jake considered this. When someone tries to wipe out your entire species, winning becomes the only thing that matters. "We underestimated you," the alien admiral continued. "We thought you were just another prey species. We were wrong." "Yes," Jake agreed, "you were." 6 months later, Ambassador Tony Clark stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Centaura Prime. Tony was 52 years old and had been Earth's senior diplomat before the war began. Now he was humanity's representative to a galaxy that viewed his species with a mixture of fear and fascination. The council chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species, many of whom had lived in terror of the Vorthak Empire for centuries. They had watched the war between humans and aliens with growing amazement, as the galaxy's apex predators were systematically defeated by a species they had never heard of. "Honorable delegates," Tony began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, "I come before you today to announce that the Vorthak threat to galactic peace has been eliminated. Their military forces have been disbanded, their weapons have been confiscated, and their survivors have been relocated to reservation worlds where they can live peacefully under human supervision." Excited whispers filled the chamber. Species that had cowered before Vorthak might for 3 centuries could hardly believe that their tormentors had been defeated. However, Tony continued, and the chamber fell silent. Humanity did not fight this war to become the galaxy's new conquerors. We fought because we were attacked and we defended ourselves. We have no desire to build an empire or subjugate other species. This statement was met with skeptical silence. Every species in the chamber knew that civilizations capable of defeating the Vorthak were capable of conquering anyone else they chose. "But," Tony added, and his tone became noticeably cooler, "we also will not tolerate any future threats to human colonies or human civilians. The galaxy has seen what happens to those who mistake our peaceful intentions for weakness." The message was polite, but unmistakable. Humanity was offering friendship and cooperation, but anyone who chose hostility would face the same fate as the Vorthak Empire. As Tony finished his speech and left the council chamber, the delegates sat in stunned silence. They had witnessed the rise of a new apex predator, one that was potentially more dangerous than the Vorthak had ever been. The aliens had been brutal conquerors, but they were predictable. They wanted territory and resources and slaves. Their motivations were simple to understand. Humans were different. They claimed to want peace, but they had demonstrated a capacity for total warfare that exceeded even the Vorthak. They offered friendship, but they had wiped out the galaxy's most feared species with cold efficiency. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to genuinely believe they were the good guys. As news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy, a new age began. The Vorthak Empire was gone, reduced to a cautionary tale about what happened when predators encountered something even more dangerous than themselves. In the depths of space, human ships began exploring territories that had been forbidden for centuries. Earth's colonies expanded into systems that the Vorthak had kept empty through fear. Humanity's influence grew with each passing month. Other species watched this expansion nervously and asked themselves the same question. Were the humans liberators who had freed the galaxy from tyranny? Or were they simply more efficient tyrants who had eliminated their competition? The answer, they suspected, would depend entirely on whether they chose to be humanity's friends or enemies. The galaxy's deadliest species had been replaced, and their successors were still writing the rules of what came next.